You can define epic any which way you want, as I think you probably know by now. Drinks trolley time. What do we have for refreshment tonight then, Suze?
On for a Kolsch-style beer, which is native to Cologne, and it's a mix of a ale and a lager, which is quite interesting. And this is Lost and Grounded's take on it. It's called Dog Day Afternoon. It features dogs on the cans and the bottles, which are quite fun. All local dogs that they photographed, and it's 4.8%, so quite tasty too. And they donate money from each can to Street Vet as well, which is very nice.
Okay, and what's it called again?
Dog Day Afternoon.
Very, very nice. Thank you very much. And Armando Iannucci's favourite film.
Oh, really?
Yes.
While we're here, just thought I'd mention that. Today's confession comes from Gary. Hello, Gary. Thank you very much, Steve, for sending in today's confession. Another smart speaker handed over. Here we go. Father Simon and the Holy Trinity of forgiveness and unforgiveness. I'm writing to you to seek redemption for something that happened 40 years ago. Having listened recently to your confession about a musical instrument and plagiarism, I'm afraid it prompted me to remember a similar moment. The year is 1986. I'm a year 4 child at primary school. It was Easter, and at the end of the Easter term, the school would put pupils forward to take part in a talent contest. This would involve a selection of children from all ages and year groups. This is way before Britain's Got Talent and Simon Cowell. Think more Marty Kane and New Faces, or Bob Monkhouse and Opportunity Knocks. I'll have to explain that to Holly later.
Do that, yeah.
Anyway, we had acts such as Lola the Margarette spinning her stick everywhere, Steve's football kick-ups, and some year 6 guy called Philip who dressed up as a girl and sang Sister Sledge's Frankie, amongst other hits.
Okay.
Well, Father Simon, the representative chosen from year 4 was me. 3 months prior, I had been bought a Casio keyboard for Christmas, and I absolutely loved it. It had all the features. I could change the tempo, add in drum beats, and there are over 100 instrumental sounds to play. It was a work of art, and I even taught myself a bit of piano. This was the talent that I was taking with me into the show. My eyes were firmly on the prize, a big fat Cadbury's button Easter egg for the winner, and back then, Father Simon, they really were big and fat and delicious. Well, it was my turn on the show. How was I going to beat the firm favourite Philip dancing around and banging out Sister Sledge? Well, I set up my stand, plugged in the keyboard, and then in front of over 150 children and teachers, I played Wham's Last Christmas. Now, I know what you're thinking, a bit of an off-season song really to play, but I had my reasons. I played it all note perfect for 4 minutes. And when I'd finished, the crowd went wild. A huge clap, and the head teacher gave me the biggest handshake. The head, who was a 6'4" Geordie called Mr. Garbett, said to the school, that was in his strong Geordie accent.
Oh, yeah.
That was absolutely brilliant. So I'm not sure why, a Christmas song, but brilliant nonetheless. He said, you could tell he was a Geordie.
Yeah.
You could.
The votes were cast and third place was read out. It was Kieran and his magic tricks. Second, with obligatory drum roll by the children's hands tapping the floor, it was Philip and his rendition of Frankie. Mr. Garbett then shouted out, and the winner is Gary. Well, it was me, Father Simon, and I couldn't believe it. I was the winner. The Easter egg was mine, all mine. Woohoo, I was so proud. My class loved me. I gained respect from the older kids, and the younger ones gazed at me in awe. One day they might be like me. All's well that ends well, but of course, here is where I have to confess. Well, as I stated before, I played Last Christmas note perfect on my keyboard. Well, that wasn't exactly true. It wasn't really note perfect because I actually had the song on demo mode.
Oh, right, yeah.
I had just pressed the button and pretended to play the keyboard the whole time. The pushing of fingers onto the keys may have looked realistic, but there was absolutely no sound coming out while the demo was playing. I could have played Rachmaninoff's Third Piano Concerto, and no one would have been any the wiser. To be honest, the best I could ever manage on the darn thing was the first half of Chopsticks or Bar Bar Black Sheep. I thought to myself, this is what they do on Top of the Pops, they mime. And back in 1986, only big expensive keyboards like mine had demo buttons, and that was why it was never questioned. So therefore, everyone was none the wiser, and to this day, no one has ever known. until this confession. So where do I begin for forgiveness? Well, first of all, from the fellow contestants of the 1986 Castle School Easter Talent Show, although they weren't that great, to be perfectly honest. From all the audience for applauding a con artist at work, even though miming was the main way that musicians entertained back in the 1980s. And lastly, to the keyboard player in Wham, was it Andrew Ridgeley? Almost certainly, for belittling their music by making my school believe that an 8-year-old could so easily reproduce their creative work. I mean, Last Christmas is an all-time great, and it went on to be number 1. My fate is in your hands, says Gary. I think I have all the names of the actual names, and the head is the actual head, and the accent was an actual Geordie accent. And I think people
was it?
Warm to that enormously. Sister Susie, what do you say to Gary the con artist?
Well, he called himself a con artist, and he just was that, really, wasn't he? I had a keyboard, a Casio keyboard. It had a demo mode. It was very fun to be at home and pretend that I was playing it. But, I wouldn't enter myself in a competition and pretend to play it. I just think it's just downright... It's outrageous, and you were cheating, and for that reason, I'm not going to forgive.
Okay, morally outraged. Sister Susie, what do you say, brother?
So I'm going to forgive, and here is the reason why. How come no one noticed that he was just doing you'd have thought you'd noticed that his fingers on the keyboard weren't quite corresponding with the tune coming out. Exactly, a bit of miming. And is that so different to what they were doing on Top of the Pops? No. Or indeed what those superstar DJs in Ibiza do, just press play on their iPod whatever they have these days. So that's what they do. So why can't Gary do that with his Casio? So for all those reasons, I'm going to forgive.
Okay, so this is entirely down to you, please. Does Gary get your forgiveness? 61054 on the text. First word is Simon. Do you forgive Gary the con artist? 61054. First word is Simon. Just before the news, we had a fabulous confession from young Gary, who, as a year 4 child at primary school in 1986, took his Casio keyboard and won the end-of-term talent competition, but that was because he played Last Christmas on demo mode. Therefore, that was the reason that every note was perfect. He's a con artist by his own admission, and the people's verdict is in. Here we go.
Well, not forgiven, says Michaela. Learning the piano is incredibly difficult. All those hours it would take for someone to learn Last Christmas, and he just sat there and mimed. Not in the spirit at all. Joshua in Lowestoft says, I'm totally forgiving tonight's confession. No one said you couldn't use demo mode, so he used it. It's the system once again. Matt is right once again for his logical reasons, lol. And finally forgiven. I entered a piece of my own art in my daughter's name, and it went into the school magazine, so I too am a con artist. Perhaps a confession for another day, says embarrassed mother, now grandma.
Yes, we'll take those confessions. If you have one, send them to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Meantime, we're helping ourselves to something from the drinks trolley as provided by Suze, live from her pub. What are we choosing today, Suze?
How about a very nice, fizzy, refreshing cream soda?
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah?
Try that again, Matt.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Okay, that's very good. Okay. Ice and a slice, thank you very much. Cream soda, trad. Very nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Suze. Okay, so here we go with today's tale, which comes from Ian. Father Simon and the Acolytes. I seek forgiveness for... there's like a 12 certificate, I suppose.
Is it? Oh, good.
Maybe. I seek forgiveness for a sin I committed when I was a pilot, working for a large airline. Please call me Ian. Some years ago, I was just coming to the end of a 24-hour stay in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, which, it has to be said, is not the most exciting of layovers for an airline pilot, and so I was more than happy to be leaving. Prior to meeting the rest of the crew at reception, I was in the final stages of dressing in my very comfortable room in a large luxury hotel. Being an ex-military chap, I took pride in my appearance, and as such, always carried my own shoe cleaning kit to polish my shoes. As I opened the shoe cleaning bag, to my surprise, out popped 2 unopened miniatures of malt whiskey.
Of course.
Now, one of the many perks of being an international long-haul pilot is access to duty-free goods on every trip. Thus, it was common to often arrive home with, quote, a bottle and 200, which I imagine is a reference to fags.
Oh, right, of course, yeah, right, yeah.
Perhaps less well known is that on an outbound sector, it was de rigueur to purchase up to 6 miniatures and 6 small tins of soft drink. Yes, we had to pay for them. These would come in handy on a long layover as a pre-night pre-night out sharpener or a bedtime tipple, that kind of thing.
Right.
Obviously, on a previous trip, I had 2 miniatures left over and had wrapped them for safekeeping in my shoe cleaning bag. On returning home, they should have been placed in my booze cupboard, but I obviously forgot about them and had inadvertently taken them to Saudi Arabia on my next trip. As I looked at them, the ramifications of smuggling whiskey into a strictly dry and very strict country was not lost on me. I must admit, Father Simon, I said a silent prayer of thanks, as had had the Saudi airport officials spotted them, I would have been in very serious trouble.
Yeah, you would.
The company briefing for entering a strict country such as Saudi was to sanitize personal belongings for any forbidden items. My initial relief at not being caught was replaced by the quandary of what I should now do with them. Risking smuggling them back out of the country was totally out of the question. So too was drinking them, as I was about to report for work, and this was not the 1980s anymore.
No, it wasn't, was it? Apparently that was okay.
No, in the 1980s, that was obviously...
Wow.
Ditching them was obviously the obvious course of action, and I quickly formulated what I have to say was an exceptional plan because pilots are clever. As part of the company's contract with this particular hotel, the crew had access to a communal room which we could use as a meeting place. The room was just a normal ensuite room with beds removed and replaced with sofas and chairs and coffee-making facilities. Our room key cards issued at reception were also coded to open this private room. So, bingo, I would hide the miniatures above the roof tiles in the crew room bathroom. What? As a then junior pilot, I knew I would be rostered to return to this unpopular destination in the coming months, whilst the senior bods were enjoying the more popular havens. Sure enough, a couple of months later, I found myself inbound to Riyadh for another night stop. The stewardess looking after us on the flight asked me if I wanted any duty-free or crew purchases. To her amusement, I did buy 6 Diet Cokes. Some hours later, I found myself settling into my room, grinning at the prospect of enjoying a couple of double scotches in Riyadh, having beaten the system, if that's what you want to call it.
Okay.
A short sprint later, I found myself at the end of a very long corridor inserting my keycard into the crew room door. However, to my absolute horror, on opening the door, I discovered that the crew room had for some reason been moved, and this room was once again an ensuite bedroom, and even worse, had a suitcase on the bed. The fact that my keycard was still able to open the door was obviously an oversight by the reception staff. On realizing the room and the very long corridor was actually devoid of people, I decided to quickly engage Mission Impossible mode, and I deftly and swiftly removed the 2 miniatures from their hiding position in the bathroom. And so, Father Simon, it came to pass that fate had been kind enough to allow a short Scotsman the unbridled pleasure of enjoying 2 double malts in the middle of Saudi Arabia. I slept well that night, and the sin I asked forgiveness for? Not the illegal smuggling of alcohol into a dry country. That was an accident.
Yeah.
Not hiding the alcohol and subsequently recovering it from a private room. No, that was absolute genius. I actually asked forgiveness for the crime of putting Diet Coke in a fine malt. And that is probably an unforgivable sin, particularly if we're heading to the bar, which is where we find Sister Susie. Diet Coke in a fine malt, Sister Susie.
Yeah, it's just not on, isn't it? I just think, you shouldn't just have it with a little bit of water or a cube of ice maybe you could have got from the hotel. You didn't need to buy the Diet Cokes.
Not sure that's the main issue here, really.
Well, no, it's not the main issue because I don't forgive him for anything he's done. Surely, I appreciate he may not have known that they were in there, but once he did discover them, he could have just poured them down the sink, didn't he? Which is also... not great, but for the country he was in, probably the best thing to do, really, wasn't it? And so I don't forgive him for any of it. Ian should have done better.
Brother Matthew.
Well, I'm struggling to see what he's done wrong here. I mean, he obviously didn't know, did he, that he had the miniatures in his bag,
which he put there.
Yes, he put them there, but he'd forgotten. He'd forgotten. It was fine. And then he came up with this great plan, put them in the ensuite. But it turns out someone else is in the ensuite. What happened to them? Never found out. Doesn't matter. But I don't think the rules apply when it's miniatures. I'm not sure about that. I'm not a lawyer.
No.
So I'm going to say.
Check that with Saudi law.
Yes, definitely forgiven. For all of those
reasons. Okay, people's verdict, please. That's the only way we're going to settle this one. 61054. Before we proceed, though, just before the news, we had a top confession from Ian, a pilot, and a story of 2 miniatures of very fine whiskey Mission Impossible and Saudi Arabia. And he was basically confessing because he put too much Diet Coke in a fine whiskey. But there were other crimes involved as well, and here's the people's verdict.
So Sue in Worthing says, gotta forgive this one for the fantastic idea of hiding it in the ceiling tiles. Genius. But Tim from Sutton Coldfield says, definitely not forgiven. Don't mess with a fine single malt. Blended, yes, you can clean the toilet with that, but leave single malt well alone. And Captain W, a long-haul pilot too, says, even before I heard the end, he's forgiven. During COVID, when everything was closed, I smuggled gin in a clean bottle of shaving foam. I'm hoping the Heathrow security staff hear this, as they can't stand crew. Love it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Well, we're learning all kinds of things. So if you are a pilot, or indeed if you're air crew, we would love to have any confession that occurs. Anonymity is fine. Send them to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Thirsty work here, so we're heading towards the drinks trolley and seeing what joy can be found there. What have you chosen for us today, Suze?
Picked a very lovely session IPA, 4%. It's called Summer Crush. It's juicy, it's fruity, and it's really lovely, and one that you could sip away in the sunshine.
Well, maybe just a third.
A third?
Yes, and then we'll have the rest later.
Okay.
Today's confession comes from Flyboy. That's how it's signed. Thank you, Flyboy. A humble request for forgiveness and possibly an apology to the laws of aviation. Father Simon, Brother Matthew, the Divine Sisters of Mercy. It all began a solid 20 years ago in what could only be described as the career high of all career highs. I was living the dream as a paramedic on a charity-based air ambulance. Imagine the thrill, zooming through the sky, saving lives, surrounded by colleagues I admired like gods of medicine and helicopter knowledge. Working in such a small, tight-knit team in an industry that constantly threw us into life or death situations was like being in the world's most chaotic family. It was only a matter of time before a dark sense of humour took root. On any given day, it was not an uncommon situation for any of us to return from a few days off work to find we had been unknowingly signed up for a charity 10K fun run, or worse, a charity skydive by our brothers of the skies. So, the stage is set. Enter Dr. X. Dr. X was a new arrival, sent to us as a temporary fill-in from a neighbouring air ambulance charity. From the start, it was clear his primary focus was competition. He wasn't just a medic, he was a self-appointed contender for air ambulance supremacy. One fateful day, the helicopter, the crown jewel of our service, was grounded due to a minor defect. A damaged blade that needed replacing. While the pilot got to work arranging the repair, we moved our medical equipment to the response car and prepared for another day of ambulance duty. Then came the good news. The replacement blade was on its way. We were going to be back in the sky by the morning. Meanwhile, in the neighbouring county, Dr. X's helicopter, identical in make and model, was sitting idle, awaiting its own blade that, well, did not seem to be showing up anytime soon. And thus the seeds of frustration began to sprout. The next morning, Dr. X arrived at the base in a mood so dark it could have been the subject of a weather report. He was on a mission to find someone, me it turns out, to explain the egregious iniquity of the situation. How the... He started loud.
Yeah.
How the hell did you get your blade within 24 hours when we've been waiting for weeks? He demanded. Now, at this point, I could have just let it go. I could have let the guy vent. But what happened next can only be described as a monumental accident of words. Miscalculation of grand proportions and an utter misunderstanding of the laws of aviation. I blurted out, well, that's because we have sports blades. Sports blades? He nearly exploded as if I had just claimed we flew with rocket-powered wings. Yup, I continued, blissfully unaware of the impending disaster. You see, we've got specialised blades designed for speed. They're perfect for our rural service, covering large areas, flying long distances. Unlike your service, which operates in a relatively small area where speed isn't that critical. At this point, Dr. X was eyeing me like my manager. Again, at this point, Dr. X was eyeing me like I had just insulted his very existence. But before he could really unleash the fury, enter Mr. D, my manager, a man with an knack for diffusing situations. Mr. D, not missing a beat, began explaining the science behind our sports blades. He elaborated on our unique takeoff and landing profiles, which took advantage of the airframe's forward motion. By the time we wrapped up the conversation with Dr. X, he was kind of pacified. So we go forward a few days and Mr. D and I are summoned to the office by the CEO. "What have you done?" they asked, in a very posh voice,
yes,
with a kind of tone that made me think we'd actually triggered a global catastrophe. And it turns out Dr. X, in his boundless insight, decided the only logical course of action was to call his charity, convinced that their service was being unfairly denied access to these superior sports blades. They demanded that the executive team step in. They, in turn, charged straight to the helicopter leasing company, delivering an ultimatum of epic proportions. Either they immediately provided a full set of these superior blades, or they'd have legal action taken place for putting lives at risk.
Wow.
This is clearly preposterous. The helicopter leasing company, caught between a rock and a very hard place, found themselves bombarded with calls and emails and meetings. Their legal team was thrust into the fray, pulling out every scrap of contract paperwork they'd ever signed with both charities. And finally, after what seemed like an eternity of back and forth, the leasing company's legal team had to lay it down straight. Sports blades don't exist.
No.
They don't really exist in their inventory. They didn't exist in the industry. They didn't even exist in the realms of possibility. In fact, they couldn't even find a helicopter blade with the word sports on it at all. And at that point, the whole thing started to unravel faster than a cheap sweater. The legal team at the leasing company calmly informed Dr. X's charity that unfortunately they had been misinformed. They explained that both charities used exactly the same blades with no special turbo mode or hidden speed features. The only reason our helicopter had been back in the air so quickly was because of the contractual priority clause that just happened to put us first in line for repairs. With that revelation and a very sheepish apology from us, Dr. X's charity was forced to eat a large slice of humble pie. So, Father Simon, and your family of forgiveness, I come to you now not just to seek forgiveness for the mayhem I unleashed on the helicopter leasing company, but also to atone for the sheer audacity of thinking I could pull off a joke at the expense of a colleague. I ask for absolution from my superiors, from the good folks at the helicopter leasing company, and if they're still listening, from Dr. X, who is still likely to be convinced that there are secret helicopter blades out there that could make him fly faster. Yours sincerely, in the hope, the alleviation of the burden of shame that has weighed heavily on my heart for more than 2 decades. Well, I mean, you could have taken advantage of this feature about 4 years ago, but that's fine, Flyboy. The very idea that someone involved in helicopters thinks that there is such a thing as sports blades seems to me preposterous. But anyway, what do you say to Flyboy, Sister Suze?
Well, I feel like I should say that there was a lot of time wasted by what seems like 2 charities here, and that I don't think is a very good thing. So the fact that Flyboy caused that, I want to be very harsh on and not forgive, but I feel like your manager got involved, and also I feel like if someone can be that stupid, then I find it really difficult. So I am just going to forgive him, because Dr. X just sounds like an idiot, doesn't he?
He does. Brother Matthew, what do you say?
I absolutely agree with Suze. Dr. X is a bit thick, and there's not a lot you can do with thick Dr. X. So, I mean, what I can't understand is why. Well, how did it get this far? How did no one? I mean, even the person answering the phones at the leasing company would have said, "No, those blades don't exist. It's been made up. How are you still falling for this?" And also, it turns out that their company was priority listed. So why wasn't Dr. X worried about that? Because he's thick, that's why. And for all those reasons, and because Chic are about to take us dancing,
that's right,
I'm going to forgive.
61054 for the People's Verdict. The verdict on tonight's confession, which came in from Flyboy, and his air ambulance story, and his sports blades, and Dr. X, who didn't come out of the story particularly well. What do we get, Matt?
So Larissa in Epsom says, forgiven. Why did no one at the leasing company say that the sports blades didn't exist? I blame the system. Johnny says, not forgiven. As Susie said, he was wasting everyone's time. What a ridiculous lie. But Dutchie in Leicester says, forgiven. As a former glider pilot who had much fun sending cadets for glider fuel, it's perfectly reasonable. If Dr. X couldn't cotton on, then he really shouldn't be a doctor.
Thank you very much for the verdicts and your confessions, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. The chips and the beans.
All right.
But we do have a drinks trolley, which is a very lovely thing. What are you serving us today, Suze?
Today, Well, I thought this is just for Max. I thought you'd like this because I know how much you like gin.
Oh, I do.
And how much you like things in a can.
Oh.
So how about
Gin in a can?
Gin in a can. It's a pink gin fizz in a can. Thought particularly the pinkness would you appreciate it.
Appeals to me.
Night moth drinks. It's very, very tasty, and you can take it
on the train,
on the beach. Picnic, festival. However you like.
Thank you. Serving suggestions as well, very useful. Today's confession comes from Sir Harry. Thanks, Sir Harry. Father Simon and the Forgiving Collective. My confession dates back to the summer of 1977 when I worked at Vauxhall Motors and we had to take the compulsory factory shutdown summer holiday. Different times. My fellow workmates, Wilksy and Brownie, nicknames created by the old tradition of just adding a Y to the end of their actual names, had booked their holiday in a guest house in Bournemouth for the last week of July. On the Monday of that week, I had a phone call from Wilksy on my parents' landline. Because we didn't have mobiles, obviously. Come down, he said. The weather is great and the beach is fantastic. He said, we've got a room with 3 beds in it, so there's room for you to join us. I made an instant decision to join them as I wasn't going anywhere until the following week. I mean, imagine having to wait that long. Wilksy told me to meet them on the beach. We're near the zigzag path, so you can't miss us, he said. I hastily packed a few bits and pieces, jumped into my Vauxhall rust bucket and drove down to Bournemouth for the first time ever. When I got there, I parked my car by the cliffs overlooking the beach and got out to have a look. Wow, it looked absolutely fantastic. The beach was heaving. There was literally thousands of people stretching from Bournemouth Pier at one end to Boscombe Pier at the other. Wilksy had said to meet him by the zigzag path. What he didn't tell me was that there were several zigzag paths leading down to the beach from the cliff top. This was in the pre-mobile days, obviously, so I was really stumped as to the best way to find them on such a massively crowded beach. After pondering the best way to locate them, I came up with the idea that if I bought a silly hat and walked up and down the beach, they might notice me. So I bought the largest and gaudiest hat I could find from the beach shop and did exactly that. Now, at that time, the Stranglers song Peaches was in the chart, and as I walked up and down the beach, the main lyrics were in my head, but the difference here was that I was looking for a couple of lemons and not peaches. Thankfully, after over an hour walking in between the throng of sunbathers, my friends eventually saw me. Wilksy said to Brownie, "Look at that Wally in the stupid hat." And then they realised that it was me. Success in my plan had worked, and I was relieved to be able to relax on the beach and have a catch-up with them after a somewhat stressful afternoon. Then we all went back to the guest house where they were staying. I checked in and we all went to the room with the 3 single beds in it. In those days, very few hotel rooms were en suite, so they showed me the shared bathroom at the end of the corridor that all the rooms on that floor had communal use of. After dinner, we went down for an evening of drinking and chatting to the girls. We had a lot of success with the first, but not much success with the second. And we then made our way back to the guest house after several pints of the local Badger beer. We went to bed, but obviously after a while the beer worked its way through and I made a half-asleep stumble down the corridor in search of the toilet. I got to the end of the corridor, opened the door and went in. As I stood warily in the darkness in preparation for the task ahead, I heard a voice say, "Are you looking for the toilet?" Startled, I turned round to see 2 shadowy figures sitting up in bed. "Next door down, matey," one of the shadowy figures added. I was 1 door out. Fortunately, I had not commenced my intended mission. I mumbled, "Sorry," put everything back in place.
Oh,
nice.
Don't need that detail.
Retreated and went to the correct door to the bathroom, then returned to my bedroom without further incident. Next morning, I thought I'd better go and apologise to the couple that I'd disturbed during the night, even though I knew it would be a bit awkward. So I went along to the same room that I'd mistakenly entered during the night and knocked on the door, but there was no one there. And upon speaking with the landlady, she told me that they'd already checked out and added that they were a honeymoon couple who had left earlier than expected for some reason. I didn't tell her that the reason might have been me, because I need forgiveness on 2 counts. First of all, for wandering up and down a crowded Bournemouth beach and inflicting my ridiculous hat on thousands of peak season holidaymakers, but mainly for disturbing a honeymoon couple in the middle of the night when I miscalculated the door to the bathroom, giving them and me a substantial shock and encouraging them to check out early. But in my defence, I will say that I was fatigued by a stressful day driving to Bournemouth and trying to find my friends on a packed beach, but also think that the honeymooners should probably have locked their bedroom door, which would have avoided an embarrassing situation. Also, looking back on the incident now, it does seem strange that they were both sitting up in bed when I turned around. Perhaps they were just having a late-night game of Cluedo, hoping for forgiveness from Sir Harry. Well, I mean, that's quite an interesting thing. Maybe it was a last night. Maybe
Yes.
I know what
Maybe.
they were doing. They were having a midnight feast.
A midnight
feast.
They'd finished the game of Cluedo.
Yeah.
They were sitting up in bed having some chocolate digestive biscuits.
Yeah.
Anyway, I feel as though Sir Harry was just a little bit hopeless, really.
Yeah.
Sister Susie.
He was a little bit hopeless, and we've had enough of late night Cluedo games on this show. I don't think we need any more of that.
Oh,
but
I don't care.
Would you like to join me for a game of late night Cluedo?
Well, I just think he should have just paid more attention. He should have paid more attention when his friends said they were going to be where they were going to be, or just all go together. And that avoids that problem, doesn't it? There you go. Should have just gone with his friends originally. Don't know why he didn't. Well, it's just, he found them. It was fine. I just think you should have just been a bit better at organising where the toilet was, because it could have been worse. I don't need to hear about putting yourself away as well, so not forgiving.
Sitting up in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning feels wrong in some way. Anyway, Brother Matthew.
Yes, no, I quite agree. And they should be looking their door. That basically, all of this could be avoided if the honeymooning couple had decided to lock the door, which if they were going to be sitting up in bed, then the first thing you do before you...
Maybe they wanted him to come in. Maybe they wanted visitors.
Oh, maybe that could have been something going on.
Grass.
Is that going on in Bournemouth in the 70s? Oh, I hope
certainly.
not. So, for all of those reasons, that went down a certain avenue. I'm going to say forgiveness.
I think it started in Bournemouth.
Oh, did it
that
really?
kind of thing. Yeah, Bournemouth is famous for it.
Oh, my.
Anyway, people's verdict, please, for Sir Harry is nocturnal mistake upsetting the newly married couple who were they thought it was the spanner in the conservatory.
The spanner?
But it's
that right now I've got it.
You're with
Cluedo.
us
Yeah.
now.
61054. First word inside. But before we proceed, the people's verdict is in on tonight's confession from Sir Harry. A standard confession, staying in a hotel. Thought he got to the toilet at the end, the communal toilet, but actually he chose the honeymoon suite by mistake with hilarious consequences. Here's the people's verdict like this.
Totally forgiven, says John in Lincoln. Communal bathrooms are a nightmare. And why did the couple have their door unlocked? I'm siding with Sir Harry. Kate in Stamford says, got to forgive this. Why did the honeymooners have their door open?
Exactly.
Did they want some company? Steady on, Kate. And Hoff says, not forgiven. We had the classy listener who brought Monet into the drive time drama, and then Sir Harry's confession, which had TMI. He is not forgiven for lowering standards in both Bournemouth and on today's show.
Well, we can't judge everybody, can we?
Well, no, that's exactly what I do.
That is true. So if you'd like to send in your confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.